Today we're looking at Noodler's Black Swan and Australian Rose. Hi, I'm Adam and I'm an ink guy. I get inks, test them, and share the results with you. Now, Noodler's Black Swan and Australian Rose is a wonderful magenta color. Before we get to the writing samples, let's do the sciencey bits. Up first is the chromatography, and I agree with Vita that I've learned a lot by doing multiple chromatographies over the years. Now the one on the left is done the way it's supposed to be done. I put a line of ink down and I immediately dunk it into water for 10 to 15 seconds. What we see here is that this ink is immediately pushing up the page. It's not fleeing from the water, but it's immediately pushing up the page. It's showing no water resistance, although there's a hint of a darker line at the bottom. The one on the right I let dry for 10 minutes before I dunk it into the water. It's in there for 10 to 15 seconds, and what we see after 10 minutes of dry time is a thick magenta line on the bottom. It's really starting to adhere to the page before the magenta and pink start pushing up that chromatography filter. Resistance tests are done to see how this ink might be expected to hold up on the page and how hard it might be to clean out of your pen. I let the smear dry for 3 days before testing it. And after 3 days, what we see is it does not like being highlighted. Don't use this if you're a student that might have to go back and highlight in your notes. But if you're using it as an editing color, if you're using it to just flat out write, it's beautiful, go ahead. Just don't expect it to hold up against the water, because when we put the water down 3 days later, just a drop started pulling a lot of that ink up. Now it's not completely gone because I only gave it 30 seconds. Pen Flush did the same thing. It started pulling a lot of this ink immediately off the page, but not all of it. We're left with a pink. Bleach is absolutely removing it from the page. I got the bleach off before it made a complete white circle, but it would completely obliterate this ink given just a little bit longer. Now this bell curve or normal distribution. Now this is a bell curve or a normal distribution. For the 365 inks I've tested, I found an average viscosity of 2.5, with normal being the range 2.1 to 2.9. Noodler's Black Swan and Australian Rose has a viscosity of 2.67, which puts it right in normal. This is a normal flowing ink. This bell curve is for dry time. For the 365 inks tested, I have found an average dry time of 17 seconds, with normal being the range from 13 to 21 seconds. And Noodler's Black Swan and Australian Rose, 19 seconds dry time. Very normal. This is completely normal as an ink in every way. Now, how do I find my dry time? I use my writing samples. I average out my extra fine and medium nibs writing samples on the Clairefontaine, Tomoe River, and Rhodia paper. Now let's take a look at the writing sample. I have this ink in sample form, and to keep my writing samples consistent, I use a Jinhao 159 with a Goulet 1.1 stub, a Jinhao X450 with a Goulet medium, and a Jinhao X750 with a Goulet extra fine. Let's look at the Clairefontaine. We have no bleeding, no ghosting. And when we go to the 1.1, we have no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen. We get shading. Lots of shading. All the time. All the time with this ink. It's fantastic. On the extra fine, we have no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade. Sorry, no shade. We have shade. It's just subtle. Here it's very subtle. Not huge, and to show you the scrubby, we can see in the far left to far right, we definitely have a shade difference. It shows in the writing. This is a very subtle, on this paper, shade difference. 11 seconds to dry. With the medium, we have no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen. Some shade, again, subtle shade going on here. 16 seconds to dry. I could recover this if I smeared this ink on this paper. Going to the Tomoe River, we have no bleeding. We have ghosting because it's Tomoe River and it likes to ghost. With the 1.1, we have no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, and the shade is gone. It's gone. Paper let the ink level out. made it boring. Now it's just a boring magenta. It's just magenta, boring as it is, nothing else. 21 seconds to dry. Go to the medium. We get the same problem. We have no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen. Shade's gone. Lost the shade. I don't know if the shade is gone because of the paper making it take so long to dry, which is what I suspect, or the tone of the paper, because it's not white. Okay, because it's a cream color paper, maybe that's making the shading go away. Regardless, looking at the scrubby, you see that you don't get it. I'm sorry. Medium gets 30 seconds to dry. On the smear test, you're not recovering it. Rhodia, no bleeding, no ghosting. With the 1.1, we have no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen. I'm not seeing a lot of the color variation here. With the extra fine, no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen. We do get color variation. Nice, gentle color variations with this ink. I think Noodler should have a shading line of inks. I like this ink. I bought it in sample form. I'm likely going to wind up buying it in bottle form. As many inks as I have, because you can never not have the shading inks. They are always awesome. 14 seconds to dry. On the medium, no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, some shade. A lot more shade on the medium than we got on the extra fine. So our pen is greatly controlling how much shade we have. Now, I'm using the Ahab with a modified flex, and in my notes, we see a lot more color variation that happens when you use flexi or very wet nibs. So I would suggest going to a flexi type. I know someone's going to tell me it's not flex, the Ahab. Not all of us can afford vintage flex. So we make do with what we have. Don't bust my bubble, man. Don't put that in a comment. I don't need to hear it. I know it's not vintage. I live with it and I'm perfectly happy. Let me be happy. So we get the color variation when it's wetter, and if we control that, the nib and the flow, we can get a whole lot more color variation. When we look at a scrubby, the medium shows us a lot of color variation. The extra fine shows us almost none. It lets us know what to sort of expect with different types of writing. And on the smear test, I could read it. Now I like to see how well colors hold up. Looking at the yellow paper, the yellow Rhodia, we have no bleeding, no ghosting. Don't really expect that to change a whole lot. Compare that to the white. This color's strong. It's funny that this color is so strong because it gives us a lot of nice shading. That's just nice to be able to see. So with the 1.1, we have no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, some shade. Not the most, some shade. On the extra fine, no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, some shading, not a ton. It doesn't come through here. I think we lose a little bit with the yellow paper. It definitely looks lighter tone than the 1.1 did. Moving on to 14 seconds to dry. Moving on to the medium. Definitely a darker tone. We have no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen. We do get shading. We get a lot of shading. We get it in we get it in quick, we get it in brown, we get it in fox, we get it in every single word. Amazing. 19 seconds to dry. Looking at the scrubby for both the extra fine and the medium, we see that the extra fine doesn't give us a lot of shade. Might have been why we're really not seeing it up here. But the medium definitely gives us shading. The smear, you could recover this. Going on to Levenger paper. No bleeding, no ghosting. With the 1.1, I just like how this paper performs. The edges of these letters look so crisp. With the 1.1, we have no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade. It's lost here. I just don't see it. On the extra fine, no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen. We definitely have some color variation. Look at it in look at it in quick. We see it in jumps. We see it in over. We've got the color variation here, but this is a very bright white paper. 10 seconds to dry. With the medium, we have no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, wicked amounts of color variation, not like your Apache Sunset, but tons. I threw a wicked like Boston right there. Boston? Sorry, people of Boston. I apologize. Wicked amount of shade right here. Without a doubt. Look at quick. If this was the Apache Sunset color, you would see the Apache Sunset shading that's going on right there. It has that same amount of shading, it's just that it's so much darker a color, it doesn't show up as much. So we get a lot of shading. I love the shading of this ink. Like I said, a bottle is not long from my future. 13 seconds to dry. When we look at the scrubbies, we see that the extra fine doesn't give us a ton of color variation. Look far left to far right so that you can get it. And when you go to the medium, you get a lot more color variation. You go far left to far right to be able to see it. You just tend to get sometimes that color variation occurs more gradual. And I could recover that smear. So it's not horrible for note taking. And that's what I have for the writing sample. Instead of trying to find inks that look like Noodler's Black Swan and Australian Rose, I would prefer to find an ink that complements its color on the page. I have chosen Diamine Teal because of its very distinctly teal color is a very nice offset. Before we get to the writing sample, I would ask if you've enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up, and if it's your first time here, I would invite you to subscribe. Now, to make sure I have a range of experience with this ink, I do the writing samples. I write with it in a different pen for a day. I then put it into a Noodler's Ahab with a modified flex nib to take my notes for this video. So what do I think of Noodler's Black Swan and Australian Rose? I think Noodler should be talking about their inks for some of their shading qualities, and this ink would be a part of that group. The shading that I get with this ink is fantastic. So now the big question, would I purchase a bottle of this ink? Yes, absolutely. I love shading and it gives it to me. Thanks for watching.